Welcome to Cosmic Rescue. I'm Cecily Saylor. I'm the founder of Typewriter Tarot, and this is a show where I talk to creative people about a creative problem they're facing, and we explore it using the art of tarot. The tarot reading that you'll see in this episode uses a spread that you can try yourself to help you deepen and expand your creative practice. And I encourage you to give it a try, regardless of your level of familiarity with tarot. Using spreads like these are a great way to begin your practice, to start exploring what the cards may mean to you, and to build your intuitive muscle. Plus, we are here to support you. You can always leave notes or questions in the comments, and we will help you the best we can. In this episode, I'm talking with Tamiko Beyer, who is a poet based in Boston, Massachusetts. Tamiko is the author of this beautiful collection of poems, Last Days. This came out in 2021, earlier this year. It is a wonderful collection that explores our relationship to nature, particularly in the time of climate change, and also what it means to fight for the planet in a world of capitalist patriarchy. It's beautifully rendered, and we are also actually featuring it in our book coven on September 25th, which is a free event. It's basically our book club. Tamiko and another poet, Adrienne Wallner, will be joining us to share a few poems at the end of our discussion. So look for that on our website if you'd like to sign up. Today, Tamiko and I are talking about the situation that is common, I think, for writers and artists after completing a big project. This feeling where new inspiration isn't coming, you feel like the well has dried up, you're not really sure which way to go next or what your next project may be, and you may feel a little bit stuck or frozen. So we're going to talk about those fallow periods and how best to handle those, because I know it's common for us to feel like we should always be producing, always be churning out new exciting work, but actually sometimes it's okay to just be resting and restoring yourself and reflecting and taking time to decide what you're going to work on next. But we'll get into that more in the episode. I hope you enjoy it. For our Typewriter Tarot members, they're going to receive a little extra segment with Tamiko where she's going to read a poem and talk about the inspiration for that piece and how it came from a really extreme and powerful environmental setting. If you're interested in Typewriter Tarot membership, you can learn more about that on our website. And we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Cosmic Rescue, Tamiko. It's so nice to be with you today.
It's really great to be here, Cecily. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this.
Yes, it is my pleasure. We met at a writers' conference where you came for a tarot reading, and then I think I saw you the year after that, right?
Yeah. I went to your panel at AWP. And then I stopped by your table after because I loved it so much. And then I think the next year I came to get a tarot reading from you.
Yeah, and both times we were talking about your creative work. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what kind of artist you are, what you like to create, all of that.
Yeah, so I'm a writer and a poet, and I have 2 books of poetry, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I also am a communications strategist. I do a lot of writing for social justice groups. And and then I do all sorts of other kind of essay writing as well.
Before we talk about your books, I also want to call out your newsletter, which I am a very satisfied subscriber to. I love getting Starlight and Strategy. Can you talk a little bit about what started that and how you see the newsletter? I can kind of offer a little bit of my take too.
Yeah, thanks for that. I started Starlight and Strategy maybe like almost 2 years ago. I can't actually remember. Time. I can't really keep track of time these days, but I started it just as a way. I felt like I had all these kind of takes on what was going on in the world, and I'm not really a social media person. I'm on social media, but I I'm not on it very actively, and there's a lot about it that I don't like. And I also just wanted to explore kind of long form writing. I mean, not like super long because it's a newsletter, but I just wanted to like have a place where I could explore the things that I was interested in, things I was curious about that I didn't have answers for, around the world and the state of the world and magic and tarot and the arts and creativity, and just have a space where I could like basically explore through writing. And I decided to start a newsletter. It was like, before, it was like in the beginning stages of like everybody has a newsletter time. So I thought I would jump on the newsletter bandwagon. And yeah, so I send a newsletter out every full moon, and then sometimes on the new moon as well, depending. And there's like a reflection or musings on something, and then I often offer like writing and or journaling and or tarot pulling prompts as just kind of a way to like offer something to my readers to engage with whatever it is that I'm musing about in the newsletter.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It always seems to begin with something like an experience that you've had, something you're thinking about. And I feel like we go on a little journey with you, and then you open into a little bit of like research or other things that or you pull in other artists or academics or advocates or activists into the newsletter. I really appreciate your attention to social justice, and as someone who's increasingly trying to participate more in whatever change we can bring to the world, it's really refreshing to see how other people are trying to do that same work in their own lives. And I think it's really important for us to keep talking about what that means and what that looks like and where we struggle and just like different things we encounter, because I may be thinking about one aspect. Social justice is like every part of our society. So I may be thinking about, this aspect, but I learned something new from you and learn about new organizations. And you also, your newsletter is free, but people can make a donation and you pass that money on to other social justice organizations. Do you want to highlight just like 2 or 3 of your the topics that you are really caring most about right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to it's hard to pick just a couple, but I guess what I would say is I really I guess another reason why I started the newsletter is, or maybe I didn't even know it was a reason why I started it, but I have come to understand that that's what I'm engaging in. Is I feel like I have a very systemic analysis of why we're in the situation that we're in. And it's a analysis that I've developed over many years of thinking about, oppression, systems of oppression, living my life as a multiracial person. I'm Japanese and white, and as a queer person. And yeah, really feeling like in this moment, we really need to understand the full, like why we're in the situation that we're in. And in my analysis, it has like everything to do with white supremacy and capitalism and heteropatriarchy, and how all of those systems intersect with each other to create. So to answer your question, I think the climate crisis and its intersection with like racial and economic justice is the kind of nexus of my passion. And I feel like that's what we need to figure out if we're going to survive in the next couple of decades. And so I think within that, there's many different issues. I'm recently learning more and more about abolition, and I feel like it's a really good frame for thinking about creating a different kind of world, because it's not just about abolishing prisons or the police system, but it's about abolishing the systems that create the need for over-policing, which is everything. And so that's kind of where I'm focusing my learning right now.
Yeah. It's a lot to, I think it's so huge and it's so dominating throughout our culture, throughout our society, that that level of thinking is so important. Looking at the origins. Hopefully more and more people will be joining that line of thought. Can you tell people where people can sign up for the newsletter?
Yeah, so it's tamiko.substack.com, I believe.
So let's talk about your book now. This is your latest book of poetry called Last Days. It came out in April, and it has some connection to the interest you have in social justice work and all of the systems you were just describing and how they intersect and how they impact our future. It is also one of our featured books for an upcoming book coven, which is a witchy book club that we host at Typewriter Tarot, and it's free for people to attend. That's happening September 25th. If people are interested in getting a copy, please do read along. And then Tamiko and another poet will be joining us. We're actually reading 2 books of poetry for that next session. So we'd love to talk about your work with others who are interested, but tell us a little bit about the book, where it came from, what it means to you.
Yeah, so I wrote it over the course of about 10 years. And it was when I was actually working for an organization called Corporate Accountability. And it covers a lot of different ground. But the heart of it, I think, is this sequence that I'm going to read a little bit of from, I think, in a bit, but it's really about like a group of revolutionaries who are working on taking down the corporate empire, and it's set in like a not too distant future, and I was really interested as I put the book together, like what would go around this sequence. And I just realized as I like looked through all of the poems that I had written over the past decade that they were really, so much of it was about understanding my particular place and position in this world, and like where we needed to go from here, or where I think we should go from here, and then what a future could look like. And I ended up writing these poems, most of which didn't end up in the book, but some of them did, where it was a future where humans and birds kind of merged. And so that's the last couple, the last section of the book. There's some of those poems, but I was really interested in this idea of flight, not like leaving the earth, not like the Octavia Butler Earthseed vision, but like what if we figured out how to stay on this earth, but understood flight in a different way, which could mean freedom in many different ways, and it also is, I think, like a different relationship to the earth. So those are some of the things that I was exploring, and as I like worked on getting the book out into the world, I realized really what I had been doing is writing poems for the people that I was working with, both in my job and in my life, the social justice warriors, the activists, and the organizers, and the cultural workers, and the healers who are thinking along these lines and trying to figure out how we create the future that we need for everyone to thrive. And so that really became the focus of of how I try to put this book out into the world.
I love that idea of merging with the birds. I'm a bird nerd myself. I have bird feeders in many places outside my home. I watch them all day. They bring me inspiration. They relax me. They are just delightful. And I'm envious that they can, I don't know, they come and visit me and I don't know what else they do all day, but I know they see a lot of stuff that I can't see. So I have a little bit of that jealousy. And I think humans would perhaps be a little humbled if they could. They might be humbled for a moment. I'm sure they would abuse the privilege of flight, but I think like similar to astronauts going to space, when we could see the Earth in its whole entity, as this like delicate planet existing in space, perhaps if humans could fly, they could potentially see the ecosystem, the connectedness of what we're part of, and hopefully theoretically treat it a little better. That's beautiful. Why don't you read a little piece of one of your poems?
Sure. So this is I'm just going to read the first few pages of the sequence, the last day sequence that I was just talking about. And it's written as prose, and then there's a ancestor chorus, which is written in poetry, which is like messages from the ancestors. Last days one, it begins with a short quote from Kate Greenstreet: "Safe is an interpretation." We didn't expect the eagerness that filled us on the last days of empire. For what? We couldn't exactly say. Metal glistened on the streets in the hot September days. The sun no longer a dandelion, the sun most definitely a muzzle. When it set, the corporation, keen to kill the dark, flipped the switch. Then the marble facades of buildings were suddenly uplit, streetlights swirled incandescent, and thousands of people hurtled through the furnace of synthesized laughter, pop songs, and an unlimited desire for all. Some of us were on the edges, blocking out the canned sounds and lights as best we could, building something new, something old. We could feel the northern half of our planet begin to tilt away from the sun. I am on the cusp of change, and the curve is shifting fast. It was an experience, and then it was a memory, and then a system of belief, a way to navigate the dissolving world. I wanted to become more salt wind, less reflection, to become quiet enough to hear the ancestors. Ancestor chorus. Find the source at the underwater roots, at the mudline, fragile strands of a new language, among cattails and seed casings. Trust the fibers will lean in the right direction, will not mislead you. Child, we have always laid one strand over, then under, the next over and under, until something like true meaning emerges from the twist of our fingers. This basket is for you, an exhortation, a map. Soon you will need to reach all of us in this river of time with the truest sentences you can weave. There were 5 of us in that small apartment, hauling water, coding and decoding, soldering metal, constructing strategies, drafting poems. I lifted heavy objects and learned to stitch up an open wound. I no longer thought of myself as a girl. I was often afraid. At the same time, I glistened in the everyday fever brought on by waves, eyes opening, the morning sky breaking. When we met, waves said holding on was dangerous. The taste of hope could make us reckless. I knew what she meant, but despite ourselves, I came to love how she tasted more than I loved any fruit on my tongue.
So beautiful, so powerful. I love that message from the ancestors that bring your attention to the earth itself and this like conjoining place of land and water, and this idea of weaving and following the strands. And it's almost like there's something about art, like the answer is in the art of weaving or putting things together. And that juxtaposition of this like ancient view of the world, and then this like hyper modern, man-made kind of like in your face construction of society. So cool. I am about to go on a trip and I'm going to be taking this book with me. So I'm glad I just got to hear the poem for the first time from you in your voice. And thank you for sharing it. So your book came out in April and you've been doing, which was, depending on someone may not know when that was, well, people know when April was. What I'm saying is that was 3 months ago. So you've been doing 3 months ago from the time this was recorded. Let me just belabor the timeline. So you've been doing book discussions, you've been doing readings and appearances, and now you're in this kind of post-production phase. And talk a little bit about where that's kind of left you creatively and where you wish you were, where you feel like you have a little bit of a challenge or some tension in your creative life.
Yeah. And in addition to like doing readings and that sort of thing, I also spent a lot of the months leading up to the book launch itself, fundraising, and then getting people to sign. Basically, I'm giving away 260 copies to organizers and activists. So that was a whole project of raising the money to do that, and then actually like getting it, getting people to telling people about it and getting people to sign up about it. So yeah, so all of that, I'm now in this place where I feel pretty depleted creatively. I haven't really written very much for a long time. Like even before the book came out, there was the whole process of editing it and doing the production, which obviously I didn't do that much of. But there was just like a lot of work to get the book out into the world, and it's just like, I think exhausting for me, or taxing, to be like promoting the book, which I didn't want to do too much of, which is why I came up with this other like way to launch the book. But that was still a lot of like putting things out into the world, and yeah, so I just feel like I don't feel super inspired to write. When I try to sit down and write, I'm not very happy with what comes out. I feel like it's just kind of dead on the page. And then I have many first drafts of poems that I just haven't like figured out how to create the space and time to revise. And I feel like I'm actually like maybe even a little scared to do that, because I'm afraid that I won't like be able to, like I will not have the creative juice to actually do it. And so yeah, I feel very like dried up is the image that keeps coming back to me of like, well, in the newsletter I wrote a little bit about like all artists need a well-stocked creative well, and I think mine is pretty depleted at this moment. And and I feel like sometimes that's fine. Like there were many stretches of the time where I didn't write while like this book was like coming into formation. But I feel like there's something that wants to come out. I feel like, but I'm not sure how to tap into that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think I just want to say to anyone watching, I think this is normal. You go through this intense production period, especially a book that's so long in the making. And then because the way our capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist culture is structured, we've all been programmed to like, what are you going to make next? Like, it's always like climb that ladder. But as a person who's been turning more and more towards like pagan orientations toward nature, and really appreciating like the wheel of the year, for example, because it honors really these different moments in our literal orbit around the sun and the seasons that we move through. And if like the earth is going through seasons, why shouldn't we, you know? So having a fallow period, a kind of winter of your creative time, I think is normal and appropriate and never something to beat yourself up about. But as you're saying, you're feeling this desire to kind of like spring, you feel like spring is coming, but you don't know what you're supposed to be planting. So we put together a tarot spread for this, and we talked about 3 questions, and I just thought of a 4th because of the poem you read. That 4th question is going to be a message from the ancestors, but we'll get there when we get there. And we're going to start with the first question, which is, why do I feel so disconnected? So I think it's always Tamiko's going to be working with her deck and picking her card for this. We're doing the reading spontaneously in the taping. But yeah, sometimes I think it's nice to know like why we kind of beat ourselves up. Like, why is this happening? Why? And maybe there's a good reason. Maybe tarot can help us.
Shuffling for a minute.
And Tamiko is using the Wild Unknown tarot deck by Kim Kranz.
I got the Justice card.
Oh, okay. Why are you feeling so disconnected? Justice. This brings up perhaps an interesting issue that I see activists talking a lot about, particularly people who are spending a lot of time on the front lines, either like agitating, being part of protests, particularly this time last summer during the Black Lives Matter protests, the importance of resting yourself where you can so that you can keep showing up for the work. And I don't think you haven't talked about like being out in the streets and like physically doing that, but you spend a lot of time and energy focusing on the problems of the world, which are overwhelming in their scope and scale. So this makes me think about, especially with the project you were talking about with your book, which is very, the first word that comes to mind is generous, but I think it just shows your commitment to what you're doing. And I think there's, sometimes people talk about the change they want to see, but then it's a question of like, what action are they taking, or what action do they take to kind of enact that value system in the world, which is that's what the Justice card is all about. And you've done that. You wanted to create a book for activists that spoke to them. I know it's for other people beyond activists, and hopefully we'll catch people and bring them into more activism at the same time. But for the activists who are like laboring so hard to really make this change that we can all benefit from, and you're trying to say like, I want you to have a free book so that you have this work of art, you have that woven basket that I made for you, and to have other people collectively support it, because not just for the money reason, but because I'm going to assume that the idea of collective input on changing what's going on in the system is so essential to the actual change. God, just seeing that card, I'm like off on a giant riff, like shut me up. But that's making me think like the work of trying to take the book, not just through a normal post-publication cycle of press, and publicity, but also into like moving the book into the hands of people that you want to nourish with your poems, that may have taken quite a toll. Like it's time for you, the activist, to be resting. I will stop. What do you think? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I had similar thoughts when I drew the card, and I think it's interesting in this deck where it's like 2 cats, the white cat and the black cat, and their like tails are crossed over. So there's like also like the concept of balance, right? I think in terms of, I think in terms of what you were saying, of like, you know, people who are on the front lines can't be on the front lines all the time, and like they need to rest. And I think, sure, like I go to protests and stuff, but I don't consider myself like a, you know, agitator in the streets kind of person. But it is true that like I do, like I feel like over the past year, I really have put in so much time and energy and, you know, just a lot into this project. And to me, it's speaking to like the need to balance that with like coming back to myself in some ways, so that I can then again go out and do other projects that are about, you know, helping shift this world and the systems in it.
Yeah, it seems like seeing the justice card in answer to this question, why do I feel so disconnected, is kind of a really, it means you did what you set out to do. And this is your time to be replenishing yourself, or to be in that fallow phase, so that the waters can kind of rush in again. So this leads to our next question: how do I nourish my creativity?
Daughter of Pentacles, which is Page of Pentacles and other decks.
Awesome. Yeah, you have this beautiful rainbow over the doe, or the fawn, becoming a doe, and that pentacle overhead. Beautiful. So the Page of Pentacles is a card that I associate with kind of like the mystic, like that pentacle being like another way to think about that pentacle is kind of like a crystal ball. And in the traditional deck, you'll see a figure holding the pentacle upwards a little bit and gazing at it with this kind of deep curiosity or like adulation. And the page being like a beginner in that movement toward mastery seems appropriate as like kind of stepping back out there again from a new place, or from a place of learning. Like you don't have to come at your next project from like all of the expertise you've already built in these different areas of your life, though I'm sure you will utilize them. But coming to kind of the world in a new way with a new kind of curiosity and big questions, which you're accustomed to asking about not just this like three-dimensional world that we're experiencing in these lifetimes, but the reverberations of that beyond time, beyond space as we know it, the mystical, you know. And so of course that you're someone who's interested in these things. So it seems like kind of going back to tarot cards or magical practices, or working with nature, or connecting with your ancestors, anything like that, meditation, could be really, or reading some like old ancient texts of some kind, things like that, that kind of like take you out of this moment and connect you with something a lot bigger, could be really nourishing. What are your feelings about this card?
Yeah, no, I love that so much. I feel like there is I feel a pull often to just be still. I mean, there's the line that I read is I want to be quiet enough to hear the ancestors. And I feel like that is, I feel that pull a lot, and I don't often listen to it. So it seems like that this card is a kind invitation to do that. And I often think about, I feel very connected to thinking about the pentacles as it relates to nature and like really earthly matters. what I was thinking when I pulled it is how I do really get nourishment and replenishment from being in nature and like working in my garden. I feel like I'm very much a beginner gardener. I just started having a garden a couple years ago and learning a lot. And I think of the pages. I've often thought of the Page of Pentacles as like the kind of energy of like, I don't know what will happen when I plant this seed, but I'm gonna find out and learn from whatever the plant is going to tell me as it grows. So I think kind of honoring that impulse that I have as well within myself as a way, it's like not separate from my work and my art, but like as part of it, like the invisible part of it, or the just another part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I have that same feeling about being in nature. I think more and more, I mean, I've always loved being outside and was given, pretty great outdoor experiences as a kid, thankfully. Thanks, mom and dad. But yeah, as an adult, really, especially as so much technology has come into our lives, come to really see just like what can be out in my garden or in my neighborhood as like these delights or, messengers from the other realms or, other versions of consciousness that normally we just kind of like overlook or undervalue. And I can also see you kind of, because of that line you mentioned, wanting to be still and quiet enough, either just like going outside. You live in Boston. And I'm sure you have much milder summers than we do in Texas, at least for a couple more years anyway. And so like finding, your favorite park and just like sitting quietly and listening for a little while. Yeah, these are really great messages so far. So our next question is, where can I look for inspiration? It's a little similar to the previous question, but a little different.
I pulled the Ten of Swords, which I have to tell you, I keep pulling this card. This is the third time in a couple of weeks that I pulled this card. So I would love to hear your interpretation of this.
Okay. Yeah. So Ten of Swords usually is not the most inspiring card. The swords are let's see, you had Justice, you had that Major Arcana card at the beginning, you had that Earthy Pentacles card, and then the swords are represent the mind, the intellect, communication, and the 10 is like maximum swords energy, and you can see that creature just like obliterated by all of these swords. And so usually it's like a level of anxiety that takes you, to like a breaking point, kind of. And anxiety comes from within us. Of course, there are conditions that cultivate and feed our anxiety, but it's in the way that our minds work and the way that our like neurological systems work that generate the anxiety for us. Mm-hmm. So it might be, sometimes we can just like stay in the anxiety. We can get really kind of like the toad in the slowly boiling pot of water. We just get used to the heat getting hotter and hotter until we're actually living day to day in this really like anxious place. And we don't feel good, but we kind of like, this is the way it is. And instead the Ten of Swords is like, what if this is a breaking point? Like, what if you take this discomfort and say, I don't want this every day. And how can I work with my mind? How can I see something on the other side of this? In the traditional card, the Rider-Waite card, there's a person lying on a beach, basically like face down with 10 swords up and down their back. And the sky is really dark, but there's this one band of light still shining. And actually talking about that makes me think of the kind of like apocalypse, like the last days, this kind of like really dark. And it makes me think of what you're interested in, which is like, if you look very closely at how capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy operate, it is really, it's like, this is, it's crippling, it's paralyzing, it's devastating. It's like humans have all of these amazing capacities for empathy and love and care and nurturing, but collectively, this is what we've decided to do with ourselves and with one another. And it's like, that's crushing. That's 10 of Swords. And so it's like, where is the hope on the other side of that? And it seems like your book of poetry is about this, like, this turn of optimism or beauty that can, like, this little channel through the darkness to something that may actually turn the tides or turn the tables. So where can I look for inspiration? I think it's kind of asking you to think about a breaking point, a point at which you're like, all right, that's enough. Whether it has to do with, like, there's also the other anxiety of like, I'm not writing poems. Why am I not writing poems? I should be writing poems. I'm a poet. Why can't I get it? And then you just feel worse and worse until finally you're like, I don't want to feel this way. It's not going to stay like this forever. My seasons are changing too. And you kind of go from 10 of Swords back to that Page of Pentacles. Like, how can I be curious? How can I just focus on the big questions and see what kind of unpredictable answers the universe delivers for me to work with? That was a lot of words too. This is my problem as a tarot reader. My soapbox gets me going, but how does that feel for you? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of that resonates. And I think that, I think that's interesting of thinking about, like, the spiral that can happen when I feel like I should be doing something and I'm not able to do it. And like beating myself up about it. And I feel like in the last couple of weeks, as I've continued to pull this card, I've been thinking about how, like, there's a lot of negative self-talk that happens in my head that's been happening for 47 years, or maybe not 47 years, but for like at least 4 decades. And like, unlearning that takes a long time. It's hard work. And I feel like the 10 of Swords maybe is like, I'm done with it. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. And I think the card maybe is like an encouragement of like, yeah, you're done with it. And it's really hard work to start changing the self, like all the ways that I'm hard on myself and that I don't feel like I'm enough. And even when I understand that it's like these bigger systems that have caused these voices in my head, like, it's hard to undo it, and it takes like daily commitment to doing that. And so I feel like that's part of what this is too. And so, like, in terms of where to find inspiration, like, maybe just like that in itself is like a place to sit with and see what comes, like the acceptance that this is hard work.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing the negative self-talk aspect of this, because it's so ubiquitous for so many of us. And like you point out, it comes from the programming we get, like living in this world, being raised by parents who grew up in this world too. And I offer this for you, but I offer it for the benefit of everyone, should anyone need it. One exercise that you might do around the 10 of Swords is to sit down and write down what you think are the 10 most toxic thoughts that run through your mind, like maybe go through a day trying to like capture them or notice them, write them down. And then on the others, like in the next column, spend some time, like when you see them all written out on one piece of paper, you're like, holy shit, that's the diet I'm feeding myself in my mind. I would never talk to a friend this way. Why am I talking to myself like this? And then on the other side, rewrite that negative thought into a positive affirmation. So if it's like, I'm worthless because I haven't written a poem in 3 months, then the affirmation would be like, I am like all of my worth has nothing to do with the poems that I write, or my poems are a reflection of my beauty when I want to create them. So there's this pressure comes off of you. And you could spend, a week or 2 weeks waking up and reading those affirmations in the morning. You could ceremoniously rip up the list of negative thoughts, burn them on a full moon or whatever. Another trick I've heard is like wearing a bracelet that's easy to take on and off. And when you catch yourself thinking that negative thought, like flip it to the other wrist to kind of like physiologically start recalibrating. And you could then say an affirmation too. So
I love those two things.
Yeah, so I would recommend those as like doable, not too time consuming exercises to kind of get through 10 of Swords phases. And then we were going to end with a message from your ancestors. It's one of my favorite things to ask the cards.
Oh, interesting. It's another Swords. It's the 6 of Swords. Is that right?
6 of Swords.
Wait, no, it's the wand. Wait, are these swords or wands? This card always confuses me in this deck. I think they're swords.
Let's see. It might be. Maybe they're wands. Do they have handles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're swords.
Okay, 6 of Swords. We'll go with that. 6 of Swords is about a transition and a journey. And you can see, I think the Wild Unknown deck is kind of like harsh in its tone. Like there's just a lot of like black in the cards. So it gives them like a little more heaviness. But you have that really dark space with these swords on the ground and this rainbow up above, another rainbow for you. If you start seeing rainbows, I would give them a little special shout out. So the 6 of Swords is about movement and journey and moving from one phase to another. So this is a really beautiful kind of reassurance, I think, from the ancestors that like this is kind of like a middle passage moment where you're recovering from the intense and long cycle of creating your last book and kind of journeying from you've sowed that field completely and you're ready to kind of cross the river to find another island or another land that is ripe for you to cultivate. And the 6 of Swords is also associated with the notion of having a protector of some kind, and that may be your ancestors themselves in this case, since we have just tried to speak with them. Like we're helping you to get there. We're taking care of you. It's just movement. It's just change. And then also because it's like a swords card and that's associated with the mind and with thought, this ties back with the Page of Pentacles, like the 6 of Swords is also encouraging you to kind of be a little bit of a scientist or an academic in relation to your own journey. Like what is happening to me? How are things changing? How am I traversing this passage? Who's coming to help me? What's inspiring me? Where do I feel my ancestors' support on some days? Do I see little messages from them? And so having that curiosity, not just about the world, but also about like this movement in your life from that past phase of creation to the next one. So it's really like, it's kind of like, Tamiko, you're on the journey, you're moving from here to there, and we're here to support you. So I love that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts you have about that card?
No, I think that really resonates. Yeah, and as I was thinking about this with Rider Waite card and that figure that's like kind of rowing the boat, I was thinking like, there they are, the ancestors.
Exactly.
It also is speaking to me and thinking about that like I don't always have to be in the driver's seat. I don't always have to be like navigating and making all the decisions. Like I can also just sit and see where things take me, where the journey takes me, and just trust that there's a reason for this moment, and yeah, as you said, like it's a passageway, it's a liminal moment that I don't need to like force into being something else.
Yeah, I like that you pointed that out. With the Six of Swords, there is the central figures of the card are the people riding in the boat, or they're the ones probably in need of the journey most of all, and they don't have to steer the boat. There's an oarsman who is taking them across the river. So yeah, you just get to go along for the ride. It's not something you have to 10 of Swords about. So yeah, I always love that question, because usually the answers are very, very loving. Our ancestors want us to succeed. So we want anyone watching to try this spread on their own. Replenishing the creative well is something that every artist returns to, a problem that we all encounter from time to time. So it's a 4-card spread. And once again, the first question is, why do I feel so disconnected? The second question is, how do I nourish my creativity? And number 3 is, where can I look for inspiration? And the final card, number 4, is a message from my ancestors. So we encourage you to try this tarot spread yourself. Even if tarot is new for you, it's worth giving it a spin. Feel free to leave any findings or the cards that you got in the comments below this video. We'll keep checking them. We're happy to provide more tarot insight if you're not sure what your reading means. We'd love to hear from you. Tamiko, thank you so much for joining us. I also want to mention that we're taping a little extra tidbit about the origins of one of your last day's poem to share with our members. So if you're interested in hearing a little more from Tamiko and some of the origins of the pieces in this amazing book, you can become a Typewriter Tarot member. And we have the book coven for Last Days coming up on September 25th, 2021. So you're welcome to join us. You can sign up on our website. Tamiko, thank you. How are you feeling after this reading? What do you think you're going to do next?
Well, thank you, Cecily. I feel this was a beautiful reading, and I feel very held by this reading and by this conversation. And I think I'm gonna, like, literally next, I'm gonna go work in my garden. But and I think, like, your suggestion of going out into a park and just sitting and being quiet, like, it's just something I have a hard time, like, doing nothing. And I think that is really a strong message from this reading. So yeah, I really appreciate it. It was fun to kind of have this conversation and then have this spread. I think is a really good and potent one. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for sharing your creative conundrum with us so that we could devise a nice tarot infused solution. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you again so much.
thank you for watching. If you liked this episode, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. There are new episodes coming every new and full moon. And again, I encourage you to try the tarot spread that you saw in this episode. Let us know how it turned out. Put questions, comments, interesting findings in the comments for this video. We'd love to hear from you. Special thanks to The Magical Objects for providing our wonderful theme song, I'm Ready. And thank you to Annar Verold, our series editor. If you want to connect with us for more tarot support, you can find us at typewritertarot.com. We offer readings, we offer membership where you can strengthen your practice over time. We provide meditations, tarot spreads, food for thought, all kinds of interesting stuff. We also provide tarot for events, so reach out. We'd love to meet you. And thanks again for watching.